Hello, friends. Today I will reveal the story of a rising analyst whose career promise turns into silent dread. This is Evan Cortez in the glass-walled consultancy headquarters. What starts as mentorship and team support hides a web of exposure no one escapes. Behind the transparent partitions, trust becomes the first casualty. Watch closely. Evan Cortez hunched over his keyboard in the open-plan expanse of the consultancy's headquarters. The glass walls refracting the late afternoon sun into sterile shards across his monitor. Rows of analysts mirrored his focus, fingers tapping metrics into spreadsheets, the hum of air conditioning underscoring the rhythm of deadlines. He cross-checked the quarterly projections for Mara's high-stakes client audit, numbers aligning with the precision she demanded. Clean, defensible, loyal to the data. Mara Lynn approached from her corner office, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, visible through the transparent partitions that made every conversation feel semi-public. She leaned over his shoulder, her voice measured, carrying the weight of her director's authority. Evan, tighten the variance analysis here. Flag any outliers as risks, not just footnotes. The board eats ambiguity for breakfast. Her eyes met his briefly, a nod of approval in the tilt of her head. You've got the eye for this. Keep it sharp. He nodded, satisfaction warming his chest, like the steady pulse of a well-run simulation. This was why he thrived here. The mentorship, the path to that senior analyst slot dangling just beyond the next review. Got it, Mara. I'll reroute the projections by end of day. Her advice landed solid, a scaffold for his work, reinforcing the trust he'd built brick by corporate brick. From across the pod, Damian Royce glanced up from his own screen, his tailored wristwatch catching the light as he rolled his chair closer. Evan's on it, Mara. Like always, he called out, voice carrying just enough to draw nods from the nearby team. Supportive, effortless, the kind of camaraderie that greased the office gears. But as Damian's words echoed off the glass, a faint ripple stirred in Evan's gut. Not quite doubt, but a whisper of exposure. Everyone heard it. The praise broadcast through the walls that promised transparency, yet hid nothing from scrutiny. Mara straightened, flashing Damian a quick smile before retreating to her office. Evan returned to his keys, the satisfaction lingering, but now edged with a subtle watchfulness. Was her counsel a boost or a subtle probe, testing his alignment? He shook it off, focusing on the screen, the glass around him reflecting his own composed reflection back at him. Untouched for now. As the day wound down, Evan Cortez lingered at his desk, long after the open-plan floor had emptied. The high-rise windows framing a city skyline, swallowed by night. The glow of his monitor cut sharp angles across his face, casting shadows that mimicked the sterile lines of the glass walls around him. Routine end-of-day emails, performance metrics, client updates, nothing urgent enough to warrant the hour. He clicked through, fingers tapping idly, until an anonymous attachment caught his eye. Labeled simply, "Listen." A voice memo. He hesitated, cursor hovering. Anonymous sends were flagged in the system, but this one had slipped through, routed via an external alias. With a sigh, he hit play, leaning back in his chair as the audio crackled to life. It was Damian's voice, unmistakable, smooth, that practiced charisma honed from years of client pitches. But the context twisted it. Evan's dragging his feet again. If he doesn't tighten up on those deliverables, this project's timeline is toast. Mara's too soft on him. Someone needs to flag it before it tanks us all. Evan froze, the words looping in his mind like a stalled spreadsheet. Damian? His partner on every milestone, the one who'd clapped him on the back after late-night revisions, shared coffee runs with that easy grin. Publicly criticizing him. Bad-mouthing to who? The recording cut off abruptly, no context, no sender. He replayed it, volume low, eyes darting to the empty desks beyond the glass partitions. The transparency was a joke. Reflections warped the truth, just like this fragment. Trust had been their shorthand. Damian's nods of approval, the unspoken pact of shared ambition. But now, a sliver of static doubt wedged in. Was this a slip? A moment of frustration? Or calculated, aimed to shift blame? Evan minimized the player, staring at the email's blank sender line. Delete it? Report it? No, he'd save it first. Analyze the metadata tomorrow. Cross-check timestamps against project logs. His gut churned, not with anger, but a quiet unraveling. Loyalty had always felt solid, a metric he could count on. But evidence like this demanded verification, didn't it? He pocketed his phone, the memo's file a cold weight in his pocket, and powered down his screen, the office's hum fading into questions he couldn't yet voice. The next morning, Evan's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking like a hesitant pulse in the dim glow of his monitor. The high-rise office hummed faintly, air vents whispering, distant keyboards clacking. But his cubicle felt sealed, a glass-walled isolation pod. He dragged the file icon, the anonymous voice memo, into a hidden folder buried under layers of project subdirectories. Just in case, he muttered, though the words tasted like evasion. Save. The progress bar filled, a thin blue vein snaking across the screen. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, the memo's gravelly voice replaying in his mind. Damian's playing you, Cortez. Check the timelines before it's your neck. Logical explanation? A disgruntled rival, maybe, or some prank from the junior analysts. Damian had covered for him last quarter, shared late-night coffee runs. Loyalty like that didn't fracture on a whim. Shaking it off, Evan pulled up the quarterly reports for Mara's initiative. Routine check. Cross-reference deliverables against the shared drive. His eyes scanned the columns, dates, metrics, attributions. At first, it flowed, seamless alignments, the firm's polished efficiency. But then, a snag. Line 47. Damian's input on the risk assessment, timestamped 1423. Evan's own follow-up, logged at 1421, impossible. He frowned, tabbing to the metadata. Adjusted? No, the original log showed a shift. Damian's entry retrofitted, overwriting a gap. Doubt coiled in his gut, a slow twist. He minimized the window, glanced over the partition. Damian's desk sat empty. Wristwatch glinting under the fluorescence like a metronome paused mid-tick. Mara hadn't said a word all morning, her office door frosted shut. Distance, unbidden, settled between them all. Evan reopened the file, comparing another set. Projections for the client pitch. Another discrepancy, a buried edit in the variance calculations, Damian's initials stamped post-deadline. Not sloppy, deliberate. His pulse quickened, not with panic, but a sharpening resolve. He couldn't unhear the memo now. Its digital echo lingered, a fragment demanding dissection. Logic should bury this, right? Pinpoint the error, rationalize the voice as noise. But as he launched a deeper audit script, pulling server logs into a new spreadsheet, the question hung. Was cold data enough to silence that nagging static in his head? The screen refreshed, rows multiplying like accusations. He straightened, jaw set, instincts overriding the old reflex to defer. One more cross-check, then he'd know. Later that afternoon, the fluorescent hum overhead cast a pallid glow over the open-plan floor, where shadows pooled in the empty cubicles like unspoken doubts. Evan Cortez hunched at his desk, the late-hour quiet amplifying the click of his mouse as he pulled up archived project files. His fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling timelines from the ether. Deadlines slotted neatly into spreadsheets, dates stamped with approvals. There, another one. The Q3 report for Mara's initiative, originally due Friday, shifted to Monday. And right before that, Damian's calendar blipped with a strategy sync in the glass-walled conference room. Evan's pulse quickened, a low thrum in his ears. He cross-referenced. The merger analysis, pushed back 2 days post Damian's quick huddle. The vendor audit, delayed after his input session. Patterns emerged like cracks in the firm's polished facade, each shift a quiet erosion. Anxiety coiled in his gut, sharp and insistent, as if the air itself pressed against his ribs. Damian's laugh echoed in his mind from lunch earlier. Easy, brotherly, the kind that had built their partnership over late nights and shared wins. Was this coincidence or sabotage, deliberate as a tampered metric? Evan's hand hovered over the delete key on an old email chain, but he pulled back, eyes narrowing. No. He tabbed to a secure drive, where the anonymous voice memo sat, its waveform a jagged scar on the screen. He hit play, the distorted voice whispering again. He's playing you for the corner office. The words slithered through his earbuds, syncing with the timeline anomalies like a hidden metronome. Trust frayed at the edges, no longer a safety net, but a snare. Mara had said nothing in their last check-in, her silence a wall of glass, transparent yet impenetrable. Distance from Damian felt instinctive now, a subtle lean away in hallways. But this demanded action. Evan minimized the memo, his jaw setting as he drafted a private query log. Cross-check metadata, trace edit histories. Evidence wasn't intuition, it was ammunition. Could patterns alone indict a colleague in this metrics-driven maze? He leaned back, the resolve hardening like code compiling, propelling him forward into the unraveling night. The following day, Evan's fingers hovered over the edge of Priya's desk, the sterile glow of her dual monitors casting long shadows across the compliance floor. He could feel the pulse in his throat, a steady thrum of anxiety knotting his gut. What if she reports this up the chain? One wrong word, and I'm the one under scrutiny. But the patterns wouldn't let him stop. The anonymous voice memo still burned in his phone's memory, its grainy timbre replaying in his mind. He's playing you, Evan. Check the timelines. He leaned in, voice low. Priya, I need your eyes on something. Off book, but it's not nothing. She glanced up from her spreadsheet, her dark eyes steady, unblinking behind wire-rimmed glasses. The open plan office hummed around them, keyboards clacking, distant phone murmurs. But here, in this corner pod, it felt like a confessional. Evan, you know I can't just... It's Damian. He cut in, sliding a printed timeline across the desk. Dates aligned like accusations. Damian's sync meetings with Mara, followed by deadline slips, reports subtly altered. Every time he huddles with her, something shifts. Blame reroutes to me. She's in. Not blind faith, but shared scrutiny. Facts over faces. He nodded, a restrained confidence settling as they cross-referenced in silence. The distance to Damian's desk across the floor, feeling vast, unbridgeable now. Priya paused, meeting his gaze. We verify everything. No assumptions. But in her hesitation, the question lingered unspoken. How far will she go for this? In the days that followed, the conference room hummed with a low buzz of fluorescent lights, reflections splintering across the glass partitions like fractured trust. Evan sat at the long table, his laptop open to the quarterly report, fingers still on the keys from the morning's revisions. The team, 15 analysts in crisp shirts and muted ties, filled the seats around him, their eyes flicking between screens and coffee cups. Mara Lynn entered last, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor, carrying a tablet that she set down with deliberate weight. "Team," she began, voice steady as a scalpel. "We're behind on the Apex deliverables. Deadline slipped last week, and that's not acceptable in this firm." Her gaze swept the room, landing on Evan like a spotlight. He felt it before he saw it, the pivot, the isolation. "Evan, your section on market projections was due Thursday. It arrived Friday. Incomplete. Explain." The words hung in the air, simple and slicing. Whispers rippled from the far end of the table. Damian, seated 2 chairs away, leaned back with a sympathetic tilt of his head. But his eyes stayed neutral, unreadable. Evan's pulse quickened, confusion coiling in his chest like a shorted wire. He'd synced those files with Damian Wednesday night, double-checked the timestamps himself. "Mara, Not now," she cut in, tapping her tablet. A projection flickered on the wall. Emails, logs, a chain of delays pinned to his name. "This impacts all of us. Perceptions matter here. Fix it, or we'll all pay." The room shifted. Nods, averted glances, the subtle lean away from him. Glass walls caught it all, multiplying his reflection into a dozen pale versions, each one smaller, exposed. Heat rose in Evan's throat, not rage, but a sharpening clarity amid the blur. Vulnerable, yes. Cut off by the woman who'd mentored him through late nights and tough calls. But silent. No. He glanced at his screen, the anonymous memo's timestamp buried in his notes, patterns of Damian's meetings now screaming in hindsight. The distance to Damian felt vast suddenly, a chasm widened by those same logs. Priya's face flashed in his mind, her quiet offer yesterday to pull compliance data. That was his anchor now. As Mara wrapped up, dismissing them with a nod, the team filed out, murmurs trailing like smoke. Evan stayed, staring at the glass, his own eyes staring back, wary, awake. Could he hold ground when the mirrors lied and trust shattered underfoot? The door clicked shut behind the last colleague, leaving only echoes. After the meeting, as tension simmered, Evan leaned against the edge of his desk, the open plan floor humming with the low drone of keyboards and murmured calls. Through the glass partitions, he watched the conference room like a fish in an aquarium. Exposed, every flicker of expression distorted by the faint reflections of overhead fluorescence. Damian stood at the head of the table, his tailored wristwatch catching the light as he gestured smoothly, voice carrying just enough to pierce the barrier. "Look, Mara's right. We can't afford these slips," Damian said, his tone all measured concern. He slid a tablet across to her, charts glowing with timelines that Evan knew had shifted overnight. "Evan's been solid, but the delays. They're pulling us under. I've rerouted what I can to keep us on track." Mara nodded, her keen eyes narrowing as she scrolled. Around her, the team, Jenkins from analytics, Sarah from ops, leaned in, their postures easing toward Damian's orbit. Whispers rippled. Reliable as ever. Stepping up. No one glanced Evan's way, the glass wall framing him as an outsider in his own domain. A knot twisted in Evan's gut, alienation settling like stale coffee. The office, once a web of nods and shared deadlines, now felt like a sieve draining him out. Damian's gaze flicked toward the partition for a split second, cool, appraising, before returning to the group. Mara signed off on the adjustments, her voice clipped. "Handle it, Damian. We need results, not excuses." Evan pushed off the desk, pulse quickening. The choice loomed, sharp as the partition's edge. Fold into the doubt, or double down on the fragments he'd hoarded, the memo's rasp, the calendar overlaps, Priya's quiet nod last night. He slipped his phone from his pocket, thumb hovering over her contact. No more waiting for trust to right itself. Facts first. As he turned toward the elevator, the glass caught his reflection, haggard, resolute, while Damian's laughter echoed faintly behind. Could evidence pierce this veil? Or would it shatter him too? That evening, Priya's fingers danced over the keyboard in the dim glow of her desk lamp. The compliance office a fortress of stacked monitors and shadowed filing cabinets. The air hummed with the low whir of servers, sterile and unrelenting. She cross-referenced Evan's scribbled notes, timestamps from the anonymous memo, deadline logs, access records, against the metadata she'd pulled from the firm's secure drive. Detached at first, her eyes traced lines of code like veins in marble. Emotion, a distant echo amid the data's cold precision. Evan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his reflection fracturing in the glass partition behind him. He watched her work, silent, the weight of isolation pressing like the city's fog against the high-rise windows. Mara hadn't spoken to him since the team meeting, her distance a chasm widening with every unanswered email. Guilt twisted in his gut, but he pushed it down, handing the reins to Priya's steady hands. No more chasing shadows on instinct. This was method, verifiable. Here, Priya said, her voice flat, pulling up a timeline overlay. Red markers bloomed. System glitches at 2:47 p.m., 4:12 p.m., 7:03 p.m. Each synced to Damian's calendar pings, his badge swipes into Mara's office. But the metadata dug deeper. Embedded timestamps from edited files routed through proxies that matched his login. She isolated one cluster, zooming in. A file sabotage at 3:15 p.m., right after a sync meeting. No coincidences, patterns etched in binary. Her detachment cracked as the links solidified. Conviction sharpened her gaze, lips pressing into a thin line. If I format this as a chain, Evan's notes feeding the logs, logs to the edits. It ties the failures directly to his access windows. No room for spin. Evan nodded, eyes on the screen. He recalled Damian's wristwatch that afternoon in the break room, its tailored face glinting under fluorescent lights, second hand ticking with mechanical poise as he clapped Evan's shoulder. Tight timeline today, huh? Damian had said. Smile easy. Now, those ticks mapped to ruin. Priya exported the file, layering annotations, irrefutable pairs of entry and error. But as the progress bar filled, doubt flickered. Would these precise matches seal the loophole, or could Damian's charm twist them into oversight? She hit save, the cursor blinking like a held breath. Evan straightened, the observer reclaiming his vantage. Priya met his eyes, resolute now. The evidence stacked, but the real test loomed. Finally, on a late night, the conference room hummed under fluorescent glare, late-night shadows stretching across the glass walls that boxed them in like a specimen under scrutiny. Evan stood at the edge of the projector beam, his thumb hovering over the laptop key, heart pounding with the residue of doubt. Had he misread the metadata? The timestamps synced to Damian's wristwatch? Priya, beside him, nodded once, her composure a steel anchor. The team, Mara at the head, Damian mid-slide on quarterly projections, turned as the screen flickered. "Stop," Evan said, voice steady but laced with the echo of hesitation. He hit enter. The projection shifted, not charts, but a cascade of files. Emails timestamped to Damian's calendar pings, altered deadlines bleeding red after his syncs with Mara. Metadata trails linking each project failure to his precise arrivals, captured by lobby cams. The voice memo played, anonymous gravel. "He's shifting the blame. Check the watch. It's the rhythm." Damian froze, his tailored sleeve twitching over the glinting timepiece. Evan, what the hell? This is sabotage. Yours. Priya stepped forward, remote in hand, streaming the feed to every monitor in the suite beyond the glass. Reflections danced on the panes, faces from adjacent offices peering in, the illusion of transparency cracking as whispers rippled. Not sabotage, she said flatly. Verification. Log entries match. 1423 on the 12th. Your entry. Report tampered at 1425. Pattern holds for 6 incidents. Mara's eyes narrowed, scanning the data grid. The room's air thickened, external pressure mounting as the broadcast looped, undeniable lines connecting dots. Evan's pulse raced. Doubt clawed, but he pushed through, pointing at the screen. You fed me the leaks, Damian. Made me the fall guy for your climb. Why? Damian's charisma splintered. Sweat beaded under the lights. He glanced at the glass as if escape lay beyond, but the walls held him, exposing every flinch. Mara leaned in, voice cutting. Explain. Now. The watch ticked audibly in the silence. Damian's shoulders slumped. It was efficient. Promotions don't wait for loyalty. The confession hung, raw, as Priya synced the final log, irrefutable. Evan exhaled, resolve settling like ballast. Mara met his gaze through the reflective sheen, a nod forming alliance where fracture had reigned. But as the feed cut and murmurs swelled beyond the glass, the question lingered. Could this shatter the intrigues or merely reset the board? In the aftermath, the fluorescent hum in the open-plan office felt sharper now, as if the lights themselves were recalibrating after the chaos. Damian's desk sat empty, a void amid the clustered monitors and half-empty coffee mugs. But the team hovered at their stations, fingers tapping keyboards with forced rhythm. Whispers threaded the air. Quick exchanges about deadlines, as if invoking routine could erase the metadata trail that had unraveled everything. Evan stood by the glass-walled conference room, his reflection fractured across the panes, earnest eyes shadowed by the day's weight, tie loosened like a concession to survival. Mara approached from the far end of the floor, her heels clicking with deliberate poise. She stopped just outside the glass, the barrier catching the faint tremor in her hand as she clutched a tablet. Evan, she said, voice low but clear, slicing through the ambient drone. I owe you an apology. I let the distortions cloud my judgment. You were right to push back. He nodded, pulse quickening, anxiety coiling in his chest like a live wire. The office beyond her pressed in, colleagues glancing sideways, their faces masks of polite detachment, eager to seal the fracture and resume the metrics grind. But the proof he'd broadcasted lingered, pixels etched into collective memory, demanding a shift. Priya lingered nearby, her compliance badge glinting under the cold lights, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared unraveling. Evan exhaled, stepping closer to the glass. It separated them still, a transparent veil that had once hidden manipulations, now forcing every micro-expression into view. It's not just about apologies, Mara. Loyalty isn't silence. It's not blind allegiance to the chain of command. His words hung, steadying as resolve took root. We've built this place on assumptions, trust without boundaries. But after what Damian did, we need controls. Transparent reports on every timeline shift. Audits tied to timestamps, not just promises. Mara's gaze met his through the reflection, her nod measured. Agreed. I'll initiate the protocol today. Cross-verified logs for all projects. She turned to Priya, extending a hand. And you? Commission lead on compliance integration. Your work with the metadata was pivotal. Priya's shoulders eased, a flicker of recognition warming her composed features. The team stirred, a few heads lifting from screens, murmurs evolving into tentative nods. Yet the glass walls amplified the undercurrent, eyes darting, postures rigid. How far would they bend toward this new edge, verifying every alliance or retreat to the comfort of old silences? Evan felt the choice settle in him. Calm now, a boundary drawn not in anger, but necessity. The office hummed on, but the reflections had changed,